Now, I'd like to introduce you to our final presenter of the day, who has just been texting me nonsense. And so I'm giggly. So that's his fault. Full disclosure, I've known Rudy since he was a teenager. He grew up in Lansing, where I live, and we attended the same church. And I beat him at basketball regularly because I was much larger than him. So now, official introduction. Rudy Valdez is an Emmy Award-winning Michigan-raised, New York City-based filmmaker committed to creating social, cultural, and political stories through a cinematic and meaningful lens. He got his start as a camera operator on the Peabody Award-winning Sundance series, Brick City, and went on to direct a true passion project, The Sentence, for HBO. It was shot and directed by Rudy over the course of a decade. And this featured documentary tells a very personal story of his sister's plight in the criminal justice system while tackling subjects like mandatory minimums and sentencing reform. For this work, he won the 2019 Primetime Emmy Award for Exceptional Merit in Documentary Filmmaking, U.S. Documentary Audience Award at the 2018 Sundance Film Festival, and a 2018 Critics' Choice Documentary Awards Best New Director nominee. He is busy on many projects since then that hopefully he'll tell us a little bit about. And now I will turn it over to Rudy.
Hey everyone, I'm Rudy. And the line about Alex ever beating me at basketball is clearly him taking some creative license in how we remember things and how we, look back on our life and we can say, look, maybe I did do these things. It's can sometimes be entertaining and sometimes sad. This is one of those moments where we're still unsure. We're unsure where his head is when he's thinking about me and basketball and him ever making a basket. So we can all of that is creative interpretation that we're gonna get into pretty deep here down the road. But yeah, thank you, Alex. I've known Alex for a very long time. He's known me since I was probably 14 or 15, something like that, when I was we look at the topic of my talk today, and it's about failure and my POV. Like, he's been witness to plenty of my failures and has seen me in the trajectory of what my life has been navigating those failures. One of which today is, obviously we fail a lot as creatives, and you can tell I failed buying this shirt and probably wearing this hat. So there are failures big and small all the time, and we continue to move on. So my story, I was talking with Alex about like what it is that would be the best thing to talk about in a venue like this with other creatives. And I think, I've done other keynotes and things like that at different film schools and acting schools and things like that. And I always find that the things that people connect to the most are when I talk about how I've created this really great relationship with failure. And I've used it as almost a tool to project me to do more things, more unique things, and expand, what I do. I'm a documentary filmmaker for sure. I work in the scripted space as well. I've worked in the comedy world for a long time as a writer. I was a kindergarten teacher for many years. I was a basketball coach. I was a theater teacher. I've lived a million lives. I was a truck driver in college. Like, I've done a million things, and each one of those things have sort of created my palette of who I am today and the storyteller I am today. I think that just telling the story, which I think people gravitate towards, and I always have a tough time talking about it, because the toughest thing for me to do is to come on any place and say, here, let me tell you about my story and how special I am, because I don't think that I'm special. I don't think any of those things, but I do think that my story is unique and often connects with people. But even before I knew Alex, probably while I knew Alex, there were a lot of things going on in my life that I didn't talk a ton about, because I wasn't comfortable with it. I wasn't comfortable in my skin about I don't even call them failures, but just, the things that we're born into and the things that we deal with. And I'm sure all of us have dealt with many of those things. But, I grew up in Lansing, Michigan, feeling super under, represented. And I grew up in all of those tropes that you hear all the time, in poverty and homelessness and all of that stuff. And I only share it because I think that it gives you a broader perspective of what I came from, but I never use it as something that defines who I am. because it's, I don't even think of those things as failures or anything like that. It's just, it gives me a POV, it gives me a perspective, and it's allowed me to look at the world from a certain way. And I think that I was very fortunate that at a very young age, I was able to recognize that, where I'm from and what I've experienced maybe isn't other people's experiences, but it made me different, it made me unique, and I used that to my advantage as much as I could. I played sports, I fought, I shouldn't say I fought, that always sounds so bad, like I was out in the streets fighting. I did martial arts for a very long time, and like these are the things that kept me busy. Alex and I would get in fights in the street. Like we Alex liked to pick a lot of fights, so I'd have to help him out, mainly at the church, which weren't the best fights to get in. But it's all about, I was very fortunate that I was able to tap into that perspective early on, and I used it in all of those elements. But I struggled a ton. I struggled with failure. I struggled with comparing myself to others, because so often I was trying to hide who I really was, and I think the only way to really do that was to try and elevate all the things that I was doing, and I just didn't have the resources and the talent and the brains, quite frankly, to be somebody who stood out. So later on in life, in junior, senior in high school, I through literal failing of all of my English classes, was told by my counselor, "You're not going to graduate high school." And I said, "Oh, okay." I wasn't expecting to graduate high school anyways, but I said, "What can I do?" He said, "You can take this English class or this drama class, and it'll give you an English credit. And if you take drama classes," this is my junior year, "if you take drama classes every single semester until you graduate and take English classes and you pass them all, you'll scrape by and you'll be able to do that." And I was like, I am not a theater person. Like I'm not, that's not where my life is headed. That's not what I do. And he said, "Don't worry." And this will give you a little insight into the school that I went to. He said, "Don't worry. You can just sit in the back of the class. As long as you show up, you'll pass." And I was like, that sounds cool. Like I can do that. So I signed up, and the first semester we were there, and I showed up as, I wouldn't say every day, or every week, but I showed up enough, to be able to have the teacher know what my name was. And at the end of the semester, the teacher, Eve Davidson, said to me, "We only have one person who hasn't performed this semester, Mr. Valdez." And I was like, whoa, I was told I just had to show up. And she was like, "Well, you should read the syllabus." I was like, "What's a syllabus?" But she said, "You have to at least get up here and perform at least one time." And I was like, I don't think I can. I don't know what this means. And we were doing these improvs on the stage, and she was like, "Just come over to the wing. I'll tell you when to come in." And again, little insight into how easy these classes were. She said, "Just go into the scene, say a couple lines, and get out, and you'll pass the class." And I was like, okay. And I'm sitting in the wings, and I'm just, my ears are ringing. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I walk out there. They're doing this scene in like a lunch scene. I don't know what they were doing. And I walk in, and I play this waiter, and I like do this thing, and I'm like, something takes over me, and I just start becoming this caricature of what a waiter is, and everyone starts laughing, and and I'm just supposed to say a couple lines and get off. And I'm like, I'm gonna keep going. Like, this is fun. And I get the bug, and I'm like, this is what I've been searching for. I can go out there and be something other than myself. People won't see anything about me. They won't judge me because it's not me that they're seeing. And so and this is a pattern in much of my life. I quit everything, and I was like, I'm going to do theater. Now I'm a theater person. And so I auditioned for my first play. My first audition, I got the lead in a Shakespeare show. I went from people telling me, you're not going to pass, you're not going to graduate high school, you're failing all your English classes. They were getting ready to put me in remedial English, to now being the lead in a Shakespeare show. And having such a firm grasp and dedicating my life to the script, I developed a really firm grasp of the English language and of Shakespeare, by iambic pentameter and all of these things. And so, you fast forward to me graduating high school at the end of my senior year, getting the lead in every play post that, I had found this new, through failure, found this new surge of like, maybe there is something I can contribute in life. And I remember going to my counselor, again, this is going to be another some more insight into the kind of school I went to. I said, "Listen, a lot of my friends have been taking these I don't know what they are, ACTs, SATs, things like that. Like, should I be doing that? Should I, like, I don't know what that means. Nobody in my family had ever graduated high school, so I didn't know what that path was and what I needed to do. And my counselor goes, no, you don't need to take the SATs or ACTs. Like, you're not college material. You're not going to be doing that. And I was like, oh, okay, he's probably right. He's my guidance counselor. He's like, and he said, you should take this test. And he gave me the military test. And I took the military test. I did really well on it. And, after the results came back, all of a sudden the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines are coming to the school, taking me out to lunch, taking me all these things, and they're recruiting me, doing all these things. And, nothing against the military. Many people in my family were in the military and like all of those things. But I turned 18 during my senior year, and I remember being at the Marine recruitment center. They drove me there from school, middle of the day, and I had the pen in my hand, and I was literally this close. I was about to sign it, and I put it down, and I said, I don't think this is for me. And the Marine recruiter just starts screaming at me, telling me how I've wasted his time, how I've done all these things, and how I'm a failure, and how I'm never going to blah, blah, blah. And I was like, now I'm really sure that this is not what I want to do. And he said, get out. And I remember walking out of the recruitment office, looking outside, and then I walked back in, and I said, you were my ride here. And he was like, get out. So I walked like 5 miles back to school by myself. And so I ended up graduating by the skin of my teeth and got a job driving trucks, doing all these things. I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And I didn't go, the next year came around, I didn't go to school the first semester. And I remember my mom coming to me and saying, listen, I know what they told you. I know all these things, but can you please just try? Can you please try? And she drove me to Lansing Community College, and she said, I'll pick 2 classes, you pick one. Like, let's just see. Like, you don't know until you've tried it. And she picked a biology course and a psychology course. I love psychology. And I picked a theater course because I thought, well, I know I'll feel comfortable doing that. Like, maybe I can at least have a little fun. And I walked into the first theater class, and it was sort of the same thing. I walk in and I just sort of sit in the back throughout the entire class, and they're doing these improv games and things. And the teacher points at me, and she's like, for me to get in the improv. And I go in and I just start working in the scene, and people are laughing. And she goes, stop. What are you doing here? And I was like, acting. She was like, why are you in my class? And I was like, because I don't know what you're asking. She was like, why are you here now? And I go, I'm very, very confused. We were having this conversation in front of the rest of the class, and I was so embarrassed because I was like, did I just really, like, what? I didn't know what was going on. She grabbed me by the shirt on my arm, and she walked me out of the class. And I remember looking back in the rest of the class, it's like, what's going on? And she just keeps walking me, and she goes, you need to be in our studio program. And I was like, what's a studio program? And she walked me to the head of the theater department. She was like, this kid needs to be in our studio program. And he goes, do you want to be in the studio program? And I go, what's a studio program? Like, I didn't know what was happening throughout this entire thing. And so I ended up getting into this 2-year studio program at LCC, this acting program. And, through what I thought was failure, through the failure of not taking my ACTs or SATs, through the failure of not going to school for the first time, like, all of these things continued to happen. And I found out that even though throughout high school, throughout middle school, even starting in grade school, I remember people telling me I wasn't very smart, that there probably weren't a lot of things that I was going to be able to do. I realized, like, I had something to contribute, and I 4-pointed 2 years of studio program, like, and that was carrying my theater classes, carrying my core classes, carrying all of these things. And somebody who hadn't had anyone in their family graduate, my mother had a 3rd grade education, my father had a 2nd grade education. I was able to go to Michigan State. I transferred to Michigan State to do theater because I had the grades. I didn't need to take an SAT or or ACT. You know, if you go to community college and you get good enough grades, you can transfer, you can apply. And I got in and I went to Michigan State and continued doing theater. And I I remember going through that, and during this time, you know, I'd met Alex throughout this process, and he sort of saw a lot of the trajectory of me doing theater and doing experimental theater and doing all these things, like stuff where I wear all black and do this stuff. Like I was doing all these weird things and trying to figure out what it meant to be a performer and to just have a sense of purpose. And I continued to try and expand that as much as I could. And I remember uh, being at MSU for a couple of years and you know, going to LA in the summertime and, you know, auditioning and like getting parts and stuff, and then coming back and doing more school and going back and going back. And I decided with about, I think I had a semester left, thinking I have so much. It was like, I felt like I was bursting. I felt like I needed to go. There were all of these other elements of where I grew up and how I grew up, that made me feel like if I don't leave now, I'm never going to leave. I'm never going to leave. There were a lot of other things going on in my life, and I was like, I have to get out of here. And so I intended to go to LA. I'd already met with agents. I'd been auditioning for stuff. Like things were going really well, and I had all this stuff set up. And about a week before I, you know, had the moving truck and all the stuff ready to go, I said, you know what? I don't like LA, and I didn't like it, and I said I'm going to go east, and I just packed up and went to New York City with $400, no job, no apartment, no anything, and I said I'm going to figure out how to make it work. And people have asked me a lot about why, like why did you leave? Why did you go? Why did you do those things? And you know, at the time I just wanted to be an actor, and I wanted to be a storyteller, and I wanted to do all these other things. And they said, well, you can do that here. And I said, you're right, 100%. You can stay here and do it. And I knew that, and I knew that I probably would have been happy doing that. It would have been fine. I would have been close to my family and friends and all those things. But there was something in me that needed to really feel failure. I needed to understand where I stood as a storyteller. And the only way I would do that is if I tested myself against, you know, what I assumed at the time was this is where you go if you want to see where you measure up with the best. And so I always would hear these stories of like, you never, and they're so cliche and they're so, you know, corny, but they're true. You know, you don't want to be on your deathbed and say, I wonder if I'd have just gone, what would have happened? There was something haunting me constantly about that idea of saying, you know, I don't want to be later on in life and say, you know, I could have gone here and done this, or I maybe could have done that and not known. I would have rather been like, I went and I failed, and I'm okay with that. But at least I know. And so I wanted to go and know. And so I went to New York and I auditioned. I was doing plays. I was teaching kindergarten. I was doing all of these different things. And, you know, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I'd written a one-man show, which I think Alex did see. He's probably seen it a couple times. And it was sort of my farewell to acting, because like most failed actors, I wrote a one-man show, and I was trying to figure out what it all meant, and what it meant to have a voice and to have a perspective and put it out into the world. And it was my first real attempt at saying like, look, I'm going to take something that is unencumbered by other people's notes, other people's perceptions of me, and other people's ideas of what my storytelling should be, and say, I'm going to just put this out into the world and see what is brought, what comes back at me. And so much so that the very first show that I didn't even write it. I had key phrases and key elements of each of the different scenes and monologues that I was going to do. But I said, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to speak from my heart, and I'm going to perform from my heart. And I only ever intended on doing this show twice. And it was about my family, and it was for my family. And the first night was going to be kind of a dress rehearsal, but to an open audience, and me just sort of getting the kinks out. And then the second night was going to be I invite my family. and they were going to see all these things that I felt and all the things that I was holding in and wanted to put out into the world. And I remember I was doing it at LCC in this little tiny theater, and I'm waiting backstage, and it was a converted theater. It was a library that they converted into a theater, like a black box theater. And I'm waiting backstage, and it's literally, talk about shoestring. It was like my friend who'd never done a theater in his life was sort of my stage manager, like putting stuff together. I had people doing lights that literally almost killed themselves trying to turn on the lights because they got shocked. Like it was not a professional thing going on. And my friend comes back and he goes, "Rudy, we have to hold the thing." I was like, "Curtain?" He was like, "Yeah, the curtain. We have to hold the curtain." And I go, "No, nobody showed up." And he goes, "No, we're bringing in more seats." He's like, "We had set up seats for like 50 people." And he was like, "I walked around the building counting, and there's over 200 people out there waiting to come in." So they were like bringing in risers, they were bringing things. And I remember walking out, and I couldn't, like, one of the things that I do as a performer is I walk out on stage, and I usually find a blank spot where I can just like focus for a second. So I understand, I sort of put myself in a place, and I couldn't find a spot that didn't have somebody there. They were standing in the rafters. It was literally, there wasn't a place that you couldn't see someone. And normally my nerves are before I walk out on stage, and as soon as I walk on the stage, they go away because the adrenaline hits. But all the nervousness hit me when I went out there. And then as I was trying to focus, front row, my entire family. And so I'm performing this thing for the first time in front of them and all these things. And the play was about pivotal moments in all my different family members' lives, and the way that I viewed them and the way that I viewed our life and our trajectory. And so I went through my dad, my mom, my older brother Val, my oldest sister Nina, my other sister Cindy, and then sort of the last monologue was me. And it was this real talk to my family about how we've gone through all these things, but I am the sum of their parts, and I recognize all the sacrifices that they had made in order to give me an opportunity to do something with my life. And I made a promise in that show and to them that I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was going to make them proud. And because I had no choice but to do that. And so that show happens, and again, I only intended on doing it these 2 times. And on the end of this, after the show on the second night, somebody comes up to me and says, "Listen, I read about this in the paper this morning. I'm from California. I was visiting somebody and I just came on a whim. Here's my card. Please give me a call next week." And I gave the person a call, and they said, "We'd love you to perform at this little event that we're doing. Do this show, do exactly what you did, and we'll pay you." It was like $2,500. I was like, $2,500? Like, I'm living in New York. I need to pay my rent. Like, I'll go and do it. And so I went and did it. I didn't even ask what it was. I didn't care. I was like, "You're going to pay me $2,500 for doing this for an hour?" Like, I didn't. And so at the end of that show, it went really well. And it was in this conference room that had like 800 people there. And after the show, people, applauded, all that stuff. But then this line started forming in front of the stage. And I went to the person. I was like, what's going on? And they go, "Just talk to them one by one." And so I went down there, and every person just started handing me a card, handing me a card, and handing me a card. I didn't know, but it was a college conference of like people who bring speakers to their colleges. And every single one was like, "Come to our college, do the performance." And so all of this was happening while these other things were happening in the background of my life. And my sister, you sort of fast forward through a lot of things, but my sister was sentenced to 15 years for a first time nonviolent offense. And I remember the whole process of that entire thing. I struggled with, because I was trying to understand what happened to her. And I remember she got this sentence. I was there for the sentencing, and they took her away. And I stood up and I looked around the room, and I had this weird realization. I stood up and I said, "Everybody somebody has to say something. Somebody has to do something. There's an injustice happening here. And I looked around the room and I quickly realized, and at that same moment, I like went back in time and I felt all of those same feelings of not being represented, not being heard, not being, and I said, I have to do something. I have to figure it out. And I didn't know what that was. And so again, fast forwarding a little bit, I promised my sister I would figure out something. And I was living in New York at the time. And one of the things that I started doing instinctively for no reason other than I wanted my sister to one day watch her children live, I started filming these little scenes with her. I would come back as much as I could afford. And I would just film birthdays, film just them running and laughing and playing and fighting, because I'm fighting for her in DC, trying to figure out how to get her home. I'm trying to figure out how to like keep all of these things together. I'm trying to survive in New York. I'm trying to do all this stuff. And I was carrying a lot of different things. And I remember about 6 months in, her daughters were 4, 2, and 5 weeks when she went away. Her older daughter was having her first dance recital. And I distinctly remember going back to Detroit or flying back to Michigan from New York at the time was like $380 round trip. And I had like $412 in my bank account. And I thought to myself, I have to do it. This was a promise I made to her. And so I flew back and I'm filming her older daughter get ready. And she says, and completely organically, completely, it just happens. I almost even turned the camera off because I was like, should I be filming this or what? But my sister calls and has a conversation with her daughter. And she says, do you know what mommy's going to do when you go to dance? I'm going to lay down on my bed. I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to think about you. And everything in my life changed in that moment. And I said, I'm going to tell this story. I've just realized that I have something in front of me that so few people understand, and that's the ramifications of these sentences. And so without a college education, without really anything going on, without anything, I had finagled my way into this school, this like great school as a kindergarten teacher. I was teaching theater, I was coaching basketball. I had just signed with and I left out a huge part of what was going on in New York in theater, but I just signed with basically the biggest acting management company out there at the time. And I went back and I quit everything. I told my principal, I'm not coming back next year. I told my acting manager, I quit. I don't send me in any more auditions. I quit everything. And I said, I'm going to figure out how to tell this story. And so I luckily had those cards from all of those people from that conference. And I started calling them and I started booking shows, booking them out, because I was like, if I could do one show a month and spread it out over a couple of years, like I can survive, I can eat, I can pay my rent. But in the meantime, I'm going to get on every film set and everything that I can to figure this out. And so I did that.
I'm going to be a jerk and tell you, hurry up, because I want to hear the story, but we're going to run out of time. So
yeah. Okay, we'll get there.
The expedited version. I probably should have done it 10 minutes ago, but so go. Tell us about how the movie came around.
Yeah, so I over the course of a decade, I made this film. I made this film about my sister, and over that, I was an intern for a couple of years, became a PA, became a sound mixer, became an editor, eventually became a cinematographer, all while working on my film sort of in secrecy on the side. I shot films for De Niro, Whoopi Goldberg, Sebastian Younger, Sam Pollard. I created a legitimate career of DIY figuring it out. And all of this was like trial and error and trying things and failing and all those things. And then, 10 years in, and this is spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen my film, which is probably most of you, through all the work that I was doing in DC with my family, for my family and for my sister, she got clemency from President Obama. And I filmed it. I filmed her coming home. I filmed all these things, and even though I was doing it in secrecy, I'd shown footage to a couple of people, and I left out a really big thing because I think it's important about failure and about owning yourself and owning your voice and owning your creativity. Early on, when I was filming, I had the great pleasure of I shouldn't say pleasure. I had the opportunity to work for people that I really admired and respected. And a few months in, I was like, can I show you a little footage of something I've been working on? and I was very nervous. I'd never shown anybody anything. And I cut this little 10-minute piece together, and 45 seconds in, this person says, I've already made that film. Who cares? Nobody cares. And it crushed me for about a week. It crushed me. And I thought about it day in and day out and day in and day out. And I said, I remember one night, most of my epiphanies come at 3 a.m. I woke up and I said, he's right. Who cares? Who am I making this for? Why am I making this? And what is going on? And it's literally something that I keep next to my desk constantly. I wrote down, who cares? Every single project that I do, it's the thing that I ask. And, you know, we fast forward 10 years and this stuff happens with my sister, and all these people, these large networks, which will remain nameless, come to me and they're like, we want to give you money. We want to help you finish this. We want to do this. We want to do that. And they were giving me all these ideas. And another production company that I'd known for a while was like, listen, we love you. We trust you. We want you to tell the story the way you want to tell it. They offered the least amount of money, but they said, we'll give you all creative control. I said, all I want is final cut and to be the director. And I want this to be I want this to be the story that I want to put out into the world. I said, deal. They stayed out of my editing room. They let me do what I had to do. And this was me, much like when I left for New York early on, saying, I got to figure out where I stand in this realm in documentary, because I've worked on other projects and taken on notes and done all these things. And so I'm trying to tell us as fast as possible. We finished the film without any big producers or any names attached, anything. I submit to the Sundance Film Festival with 15,000 other films. And I went through this thing called without a box, the way everybody else who doesn't have a celebrity attached or a network attached submits. And I got in. It got in, not only got in, but got in competition. And we showed up. We weren't on anybody's radar, anyone's radar. We only sent it to one person, a huge reviewer who we only sent it to him. He gave it a great review right before we got to Sundance. And we went from, there's a big board at Sundance where you can go and see all the tickets that have been sold. And I remember being so excited to go there. And I looked and I was like, sold out, sold out, sold out. And then I looked at our film and I was like, okay, not sold out, but that's fine. That's fine. Like it's totally fine. And we go to the premiere and I sit there and the premiere sells out like at the last second, and we're sitting there through the whole thing. And I don't remember anything. I'm just like tunnel vision, getting dizzy, about to throw up. And I was like, and I remember looking around and not seeing a reaction from anybody. And I'm like, well, if you're going to crap the bed, you do it at Sundance and you do it big and you figure out how to come back from that. And there's this weird moment at the end of the film that is almost like a stop start, where there's this epilogue. And I remember talking to my producers and saying, should I fix that so it's a smoother and people know that it's end? And they're like, no, it's great, because you're going to get a good chance. Like if during that stop start, if people are reacting, you know, they love this film. And I was like, okay. So we're coming up to that stop start. You could hear a pin drop in the theater. And I was like, I crapped the bed. I was literally looking at the exits, and contractually you have to go up and talk after the film, whether it's a bomb or not. And I was like,
oh no, did he freeze?
nobody said anything. And I was like, what is happening? And so we get up there and the programmer goes up and he's a little baffled too. And he's like, director Rudy Valdez. And the audience just gets up and applauds for 15 minutes. Like I couldn't talk. I couldn't. And so I go to the big board after, and we're sold out for the rest of the week. We win the audience award. I end up winning the Primetime Emmy. We get picked up by HBO. We do all of these things. And I say all of that because in the grand scheme of things, what I think was the secret sauce, what was the ability for it to be the success that it was, and the ability for me to have the career that I had, was that I was unafraid to fail. I was unafraid to say, this is my unencumbered voice. This is my opportunity to say, hey, I want to know where I stand in all of this. And I think the only way that happened was because I was okay with failing, because I needed to know where I stood. And I think that we're getting away from that in a lot of ways, in a lot of creative endeavors, where a lot of the things are made by committee and made to fit into a formula and made to win no matter what. You set up all these stages to win, and I feel that we're getting away from that, and that's causing us to lose a lot of voice in whatever medium we're acting in, because we have to take swings. You're not going to hit a home run if you don't take a swing, and you're not going to hit a home run unless you're afraid to strike out. And we strike out all the time, but we get back up and we try again. So that's my little story of failure in my relationship.
That's fantastic, Rudy. We've got about 5 minutes left, 5 or 6 minutes left. I want you guys to have a chance to ask Rudy some questions. So if you want to put them in the chat or raise your hand, we'll try to do that. Listen, after that, Rudy has, just kept doing this, right? Like now the names he works for and the people who call him and contact him about doing work for them are, much like Simone, who we talked to earlier, they're all the names you'd recognize, right? What Rudy glossed over is like that's a great success story. I'm emotional, right? Like, because I remember when this little kid, I heard about this. It's crazy. And his movie, it's on HBO. You can go watch it. Take the free, like, if you don't have HBO, sign up for the free thing and watch it. It's called The Sentence. We also put links to some of the other projects he's been working on, but it's well worth your time, especially now that you've heard Rudy's heart. But he worked for 10 years and there wasn't anybody telling him that it was going to be worth it, except he wanted to let his sister see her daughters grow up, right? Like that part gets glossed over because we want to hear about the success as well. But sometimes, we have to decide what's important to us and put our head down and work. I just wanted you all to meet Rudy, right? I'm glad he made it big enough that he's got credentials that make him a worthwhile speaker, but his story is amazing. I think, not to put words in his mouth, but I think he would tell you that you all have stories that are amazing. All right, who's got questions?
No math questions.
Yeah,
Caroline,
just jump in if you've got them.
Yeah, Caroline had the story about what do you prefer, acting, film, or directing?
Film work. It was so crazy because acting was such a big part of my life and such a big passion for me. But the second that I figured out the power of other people's stories and giving other people a platform, all of that passion, it weirdly just went away. I didn't, and I've said this before, and I've said it to producers and networks that I've worked for. I'm like, if there's a way for me to direct films and nobody know that I'm directing them, let's find that out. I just finished a couple of other films, and they tried to put me on press tours. I'm like, no, it's not me. I have the easy job. The hard job is being in front of this camera and being open and honest and vulnerable. Talk to the people whose stories we're sharing. That's so. I don't know. It went from this weird thing of like trying to hide everything out front to now trying to just be in the back and allow other people. Like I've said a billion times, I'm a filmmaker. I love it. I do it, and I hope to do it for the rest of my life. But in the same respect, if when I pass, people ask me or I was actually asked this question, like, when you pass, like, what film do you want people to remember you by? And I said, in all honesty, if people just remember me as a filmmaker, I've lived the wrong life. I've done the wrong thing. So it's like, there's so much more to all of this. And I think like that goes to the acting. Like, I think the acting for me at the time was just my own way of trying to be relevant and trying to hide out in the open, and I didn't need that anymore. And once I didn't need that validation anymore, it was easy for me to step away from it.
What are you working on now, Rudy?
So right now I'm directing a 6-part series for Disney about the Detroit Youth Choir. I'm directing a documentary about Carlos Santana. I just wrote a scripted series that was picked up by Amazon. I just wrote a feature film that just got greenlit last week. I'm directing.
Braggadocious alert! Braggadocious alert!
Don't ask, Alex, if you don't want to hear. Don't ask.
So good for you.
And I have 5 other films in production right now and in development right now that will move forward for the next 2 to 3 years. And I think most importantly, I'm a father of 2 young girls, a husband, and it's so fun. My editor was just in the room and just walked out a little while ago, but I'm at a point where I'm asking myself a lot of those same questions I asked when I left, and it's those cliche things again that eat away at me, where it's like, you never hear somebody at the end of their life saying, I wish I'd worked more, and it's like, so I'm trying to balance, I work a ton, but I don't want to miss my kids, so it's like, it's a constant struggle as a creative, as somebody whose schedule isn't always their own. You have to understand what success is and what success means, and have your own measure of it. And I think I'm doing a pretty good job of understanding what success for me means. And it means being with my kids and doing all of those things. And so a lot of people always say, after the sentence came out and you got, you became successful. And I always say, I was successful years before the sentence. My mother told me when I quit teaching and when I did all these things, she said, set your level, understand what this means to you. And my level at the time was like, if I can figure out a way to work in this film world and make as much money as I was making teaching, I'm successful. I can provide, I can do those things, and I can love every bit of this. And I did that, 3 years after quitting. And was I, the top credit on these films? No, but I loved every second of what I was doing. And that's success. Like, that's, so few people can say that. So yeah, just understand that portion of this whole thing,
One last question. What advice do you have for young high school kids who want to be filmmakers, to be more practical instead of
be filmmakers? Yeah, be filmmakers. Like, I think that's the toughest thing. It's like, when I started The Sentence, for example, I started on a high 8 film. A high 8 film and a passion to tell stories. And I think the biggest thing that I would say is understand your point of view. The reason why I'm working on so many projects right now and why I've had so many projects is because the thing that I think, and I don't like to say that I'm special or better than anybody else, I'm not. But I think the thing that people gravitate towards when I'm pitching, when I'm delivering something, is that I have a very distinct POV. And I don't think of myself necessarily as a director, but as a filtration system of all of my life experiences and where I come from. And very few people have a similar life experience. So as long as I stay true to what that is, and I don't allow my sort of left of center view of everything pull more to the center so that I can be more marketable and more commercial, then the second I do that, I'm not going to like what I do anymore. Every project I'm on, they're like, they love my passion, they love my POV, and they try to pull me to the center so that I can be more marketable. And I'm like, no, this is what makes me unique. This is what makes me distinct. People are always like, what director, what movie, what thing is it that you try to emulate? And I'm like, I don't. I appreciate them. I appreciate them all for what they are, but I need to create my own voice. And so I always say, make films. You have all the power in your pocket with an iPhone to go and make a film. Tell stories. If you really love it, do it. Don't wait till you have the best camera, the best lens, the best thing, the best whatever. Make a lot of crap, because you're going to get that out of your system. I made a ton of crap. I didn't even get into that part of my story where I made so many terrible things, but all of those things, I picked these little things that worked and I rolled with that, and I brought that to the next thing and that to the next thing. And I slowly built, it took me 10 years to make my first film. I'm in no rush. I'm in no rush to be better than anybody. I'm in no rush to have anything done before anyone. I'm not built for this competition of what all of this creative competition is. And like, I'm not built for that. I don't do that. That's not how I measure success in anything. It's, like any artist who's here, the success is you have something in your head that doesn't exist in this world, and you get that thing and you put it out into the world. Like, that's success.
All right, buddy. I gotta cut you off. We're a couple minutes over. I have enjoyed hearing your story. It's good when you fly back to Detroit with that youth choir stuff. We do have to get back together.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much to all of our presenters, but to Rudy, especially. He's our last one. Today's been great. It's been a great way to kick off our day at the UCDA Creative Summit. Another friendly.